Another awkward interview from Keith Urban has resurfaced. In an interview from September 2nd that has since gone viral amid the news of his and Nicole Kidman's divorce, the country star appeared uncomfortable when asked about the baby girl star. Speaking on the Australian radio program Gold 101.7's Jonesy and Amanda, Urban, 57, dodged questions about his and Kidman's love story, which began when they met at an event. If you hadn't both been there that day, would your paths somewhere have inevitably crossed? Or maybe this incredible life story wouldn't have happened, co-host Amanda Keller asked Urban. No, I think it would, the country star replied. Keller then asked Urban if he believed in fate. No idea, Urban said, which brought an awkward silence. I just often think that if you weren't at that event, maybe you don't have the same friendship group, it may never have happened, Keller mused. Urban appeared to grow increasingly uncomfortable, unbuttoning and removing his jacket. You never know. Anyway, moving on, he concluded. The talk show's Instagram account reshared the clip on September 30th. Prior to this, Keith Urban loved chatting about Nicole Kidman with us. He encouraged it, actually, the caption read. Another interview clip from July featuring Urban on air with Ryan Seacrest shows him appearing uncomfortable while the host gushes about Kidman, 58. When discussing the projects Kidman had been working on recently, Seacrest, 50, asked about how the couple manages their schedules. Is that something with your life, her life, and mapping it all out with production and touring? That's a job, isn't it? The host asked. Urban paused before responding. It's a job. Yeah, he said. Life is in session. It was revealed on Monday, September 29th, that the couple, who had been married for 19 years, was separating. The following day, Kidman filed for divorce in Nashville, where she and the Blue Ain't Your Color singer had lived since 2007. She cited irreconcilable differences as the reason for the split, with the date of separation listed as the date of filing. A source in Urban Circle told People on Tuesday that the country star has just been going through some stuff as of late. He has been making questionable choices for some time now, and this was not the case of them just drifting apart, added a Kidman insider. A source told People that their split is turning dramatic. Nicole's hurt and feels betrayed, the source said. Miles away from that low-lit studio, in a house that had once been a repository of shared rituals, kitchen counters scrubbed, coffee mugs placed on the same saucer, a laundry pile that was never quite his or hers, Keith woke in the blue hush of pre-dawn. He had missed sleep the last few nights, as if the world kept rearranging itself at the edges of his life and he couldn't find the original plan. He lay there for some time, letting the hush settle, playing chord progressions in his head like a man examining an old map. He thought of the morning they met, how a simple social flutter had become a planet they orbited together. He thought about what fate had been supposed to look like when they had first laughed at the speculation and called their alignment a kindness of time and place. Fate, he had once told a journalist, was a generous idea. Later on the radio he said no idea, and the syllables landed with an awkwardness that became now an emblem of something larger. Fate had been replaced with pattern, with habit, with the slow math of distance. Over coffee, he scrolled without meaning to. The resurfaced clip, then the headlines, then talk of dates and filings and legal language. Icons and punctuation and thin verdicts, his life broken into shareable paragraphs. The feed glowed with people he didn't know who felt they had a right to explain him to the world. He felt a strange temptation to reply, to straighten every sentence, to contextualize every glance. But there were two daughters asleep upstairs whose world did not need untangling by strangers in comment boxes. He closed the phone and drank the coffee instead, black, bitter, somehow steadier. A manager called in the morning with a measured voice. We'll get ahead of this. Brief statement. Respectful. Kids first. There was a list of talking points, media schedules, a path to sanitized calm. The course of action was always the same: performate responsibility, insist on privacy, reiterate love for the children. He agreed because it was the only available choreography that did not make the girls wince. But the choreography did not help when lights were off and the house breathed around his solitude. His mind reverted to interviews, old rehearsed pearls and spontaneous slips. The worst were the ones where someone else's adoration for Nicole, her films, her warmth on the carpet, the glow reserve of a star, left him feeling oddly small and outside of himself. On radio, on red carpets, in late-night segments, he had been used to talking about songs and touring, about the machinery of his work. Until she, Nicole, became the thing to speak about. Even under praise, he had felt separate, Praise directed at her detonated in him, not in a nasty way but like a pebble dropped into deep water whose ripples disturbed the usual calm. He tried to remember the sound of their house when the children were small, laughter that shared the same breath, meals that were improvised on a whim, the easy physicality of hands that still knew the map of habit. They had often been described as a pairing who made minimal noise about their celebrity, a private constancy in a world of flashbulbs. To the public, the splitting was as shocking as any headline. To him, it felt like the culmination of small things: closed doors, late-night texts, commitments missed not with malice but with a slow wearing down of the glue that once held two calendars in the same orbit. He had not cheated, he told himself. Words like that stood in the dark like stones you could trip on. The truth was more about absence, of staying present, of meeting her halfway. He had gone on tour, then another project, then a moment when studio time and gig scheduling formed a lattice that made it easier to sleep in a different house than to pass through the ruts at the family home. He had noticed the absence and attempted to fix it in small visible ways: flowers sent, surprise evenings planned, quiet texts. Those gestures did not mend what had become a pattern. The press had made their own narrative. Sources were quoted about moving out, about betrayal, about questionable choices. Voices that mattered to the story were often those who had been on its periphery, friends and acquaintances who had watched a couple from a distance and formed an impression. These stories lacked the intimacy of the true unspooling, which tends to be messier, less sensational, and also completely mundane. In the center of the story was the clip, the jacket taken off, the silence, the awkward pivot. He watched it again and again and imagined the room anew, a co-host pressing for a romantic mythology about where two lives first crossed, a man asked to condense 19 years of intimacy, of daily salvage, into a soundbite and failing. He felt embarrassed at himself for that failure more than anything else. He wanted to be the man who could turn that awkwardness into charm, who could navigate the question gracefully and leave everyone imagining a neat movie-style romance. Instead, he had exhaled, and the world made sanctimony of that exhale. Nicole moved through the day in parallel, a life of red carpet measured grace and a private gravity that held into being two girls who needed a steady axis. Her filing, the legal language that authorized a formal end, felt like an administrative punctuation to a long private conversation. She had fought, she said to herself in moments when no one was listening, to save what she could. That this now sat on courthouse paper made the hurting feel arranged and formal in a way that was unfair. In the evenings when he drove through Nashville, the city felt like a town whose center of gravity had shifted. People looked at him differently now, a cautionary tale or a tragic figure, depending on where their hearts resided. Every time a microphone angled near him, he rehearsed a neutral cadence. Cameras had always been willing participants in the architecture of celebrity. They recorded, they amplified, they redistributed. Now they also archived missteps, turning small human moments into viral evidence. At a friend's house, he found himself half listening to a television pundit argue whether the jacket had been removed in agitation or simply because it was warm in the studio. The argument wore a performative seriousness that made him laugh, and the laugh sounded foreign in his own ears. He thought about how strange it was that the public appetite for the story often had less to do with the truth than with drama. He thought about how exhausted he was of being a subject. He called his sister. "I saw it," she said without the layer of commentary the world supplied. "You okay?" "Yup," he lied, because lying in small things felt easier than swimming through the clarifying silence that honesty sometimes requires. Lie by lie he built a small refuge. It was a fragile architecture, but it worked if the world stayed polite. At night, when the house was completely dark, he would sometimes pick up his guitar and play something that did not yet have words. Music had always been his language of fidelity, a way to process confusion, to anchor a flailing heart. He would let chords come and go and sometimes, in the middle of a late riff, realize he had been singing a question and not a refrain. The tune would stop, unresolved. The viral clip altered something else too. It constructed a chorus of strangers who felt entitled to infer his inner life. Social media created roles for everyone: the judge, the defender, the conspirator. People spoke as if they had been in the kitchen while these moments were being made. For the daughters, he feared the viral clip's afterlife. For the adults it was a mirror that showed a sliver of an hour and asked the whole of a marriage to answer for it. When the filing news broke, reporters drifted toward the edges of the home like weather. He learned to be precise. He learned to funnel declarations through a professional filter that codified affection into measured phrases. "We remain family first," a statement read. We will continue to co-parent with love and respect. It was true as far as a sentence could be true. But the sentence did not live in the bedrooms or school runs or the soft fury of middle-of-the-night parenting. That life required work beyond the shape of words on paper. On a rainy afternoon, he found himself in a small studio, face to face with a producer who had once stood behind a stage lamp. The producer's question was unglamorous and gentle. "How are you doing?" It felt like someone asking about the weather in a town you used to live in. "I'm learning," he said. "I'm learning to be more present." "Do you regret things?" the producer asked. He thought of all the things that could be named regret: missed concerts, the times he'd chosen a rehearsal over a home-cooked dinner, the ways stress had made him small. He thought of kindness not given and kindness withheld. "Yes," he said finally, because to say anything else felt untrue. "I regret not always being better." That admission did not explode into absolution. It did not erase the clip or the headlines. It did something that mattered more quietly, put him back into the problem, rather than outside of it. It was the first honest moment that had not been manufactured for public consumption. It felt vulnerable in the way that private things do when they are true. Some nights, after the day's legal calls and the chorus of commentary had subsided, he would call Nicole, short conversations about the girls, about a school recital, about a dentist appointment. The conversations were practical and threaded with affection that had nothing to do with the public narrative. They felt real in a way the cameras never captured. He wanted, more than anything, for the girls to have parents who could be ordinary in an extraordinary sphere. Towards the end of the story that people outside of them composed, there remained this small stubborn fact: lives are more complicated than clips. A clip may be viral, a marriage is not. The two girls, years of shared laughter, the messy constellations of a family, weren't a headline, and neither loving them nor failing at love could be properly captured in a 30-second soundbite. One warm evening, he sat in a quiet park bench and watched his daughter play at the edge of the grass. She laughed with the reckless concentration of the young. She did not yet know the magnitude of adult vocabulary. A mother nearby smiled in the direction of the family, and the small human moments arranged themselves into a pattern that felt healed only in pieces. He read the clip in the papers and thought about how the jacket removal had become more spectacle than choice. He thought about how, for all the commentary, the only honest language was the private one they spoke when no one was listening. The public might keep replaying a line, "You never know," imagining it as cool evasion. He knew it for what it truly was: the admission of not knowing how things run, of letting life be what it is, and of moving forward the only way any person might, awkwardly and with a hope that the next question could be met a little more honestly.